Hello, wars and conflicts have been a sad reality throughout all of human history, ever since the old caveman days until today in the 21st century. And as time goes on and technology improves, human warfare gets more deadly, more complex, and also more expensive. You are watching the top 10 most expensive military operations, so sit tight and pay attention because I'm sure you are going to be completely blown away by this list. I will show you everything from epic battles that changed the course of history to trillion-dollar military operations. But before we get into that, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. And now, without further ado, let's get to the cool stuff. Number 10. Operation Rolling Thunder. The 10th most expensive military operation on our list is Operation Rolling Thunder. Operation Rolling Thunder was the first full-fledged assault operation by the United States on the Vietnam War. Before then, the US had only intervened in the Vietnam Civil War by doing a few bombings here and there. But after the Viet Cong attacked a US airbase, President Lyndon B. Johnson decided it was time to get involved knee-deep in the Civil War. The operation first started with massive bombings by aircraft and warships on the rival infrastructure. Soon after, thousands of troops were deployed on the ground to engage with the Viet Cong enemies in the dense Vietnam jungle. The operation lasted more than 3 years, and thousands of fighter jets and more than 30,000 soldiers were deployed in total, which ended up costing more than $1 billion at the time, probably worth close to $7.5 billion today adjusted for inflation. Surprisingly, the American public opinion was very supportive of the war at the time. After all, morale was high and it seemed like they couldn't lose. But little did they know that the Vietnam War would literally wreck the US economy. The entire war cost more than $150 billion at the time and brought rampant inflation and social upheaval to the country. Number 9. Operation Inherent Resolve. The 9th most expensive military operation on our list is Operation Inherent Resolve. This operation was launched in 2014 in response to the rise of the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, or ISIL for short, and it is still running to this day. Its goal is to re-establish the peace and sovereignty of local governments and hopefully bring peace to the Middle East region. The operation started off in Syria, Libya, and Iraq, which were under ISIL control at the time. And it is a full-on assault on the ISIL, with attacks coming from every angle: land, air, and sea. Hundreds of fighter jets, 6 supercarrier ships, and more than 20,000 troops and military contractors have been deployed. Just so you know, more than 35,000 airstrikes have already been launched against the ISIL, and probably many more to come. And with so many troops on the ground, this operation has already spent $14.3 billion. And there is no reason for us to believe that all of this military spending will stop anytime soon. Number 8. Operation Allied Forces. The next expensive operation on our list is Operation Allied Forces. This operation was coordinated by the NATO alliance way back in 1999. In case you don't know, the NATO alliance consists of 30 countries, including the United States, Great Britain, Canada, and France. And back then, Yugoslavia was determined to wipe the Albanian ethnic group from the face of the earth, and a major genocide was taking place. So, NATO decided to intervene in the conflict, allegedly to save the Albanians from the genocide. Operation Allied Forces lasted for more than 70 days, with non-stop bombings to undermine the Yugoslavian army and endless air combats targeting its infrastructure. More than 1,000 aircraft and 30 warships were used during the operation, which ended up costing more than $15 billion to the parties involved. Just to put this number in perspective, that's more than $200 million per day of bombing, more than enough to bring Yugoslavian leaders to the negotiating table. Number 7. Operation Noble Eagle. Now, the 7th most expensive military operation on our list is Operation Noble Eagle. This operation was a joint operation between the US and Canadian Air Forces, and it was launched back in September 2001 in response to the 9/11 attacks. The goal of the operation was to guard and protect the US homeland and airspace from potential terrorist attacks just like 9/11. Thousands of reserve personnel from the National Guard were mobilized to participate in this urgent operation, and the Defense Department assisted the operation with a handful of F-15 Eagle fighter jets to help protect potential targets from terrorist attacks, such as the White House, the Pentagon, and the Capitol building. Well, there were no combats or any clear and specific enemies to engage in this operation, but it became one of the most expensive military operations simply because those in charge of it don't think the threat was cleared yet. And so, this operation continues to this day and has more than $27 billion to the Department of Defense. Number 6. Operation Desert Storm. The next expensive military operation on our list is Operation Desert Storm. This operation was led by the US, but soon 34 other countries decided to join, such as Great Britain, France, and even Saudi Arabia. It was launched in response to the Iraqi attempt to occupy and annex his oil-rich neighbor Kuwait. As usual, the operation started with bombings from aircraft and warships to undermine the infrastructure of the Iraqi army. Soon after, a massive ground campaign started. The US deployed more than 700,000 men, and the rest of the coalition deployed 300,000 more, totaling 1 million soldiers. Not to mention 100 more F-15 and F-16 fighter jets and 5 amphibious assault warships to assist the ground troops. Well, as you can probably tell already, this was just too much for the small Iraqi army to handle. Less than 100 hours after troops got on the ground, a ceasefire was established, and the Iraqi soldiers started to flee back to their home country. The cost of the operation is estimated at $61 billion by the US Department of Defense. However, these figures do not include the social and environmental damage caused by the war, which was huge. For instance, on their way back to their home country, the Iraqi troops set on fire more than 700 oil wells. To make matters worse, they placed tons of landmines on its surroundings to make putting out the fire practically impossible. The oil wells burned for months on end and caused a host of environmental problems for the Gulf region. Number 5. Operation Freedom Sentinel. The next expensive military operation on our list is Operation Freedom Sentinel. This operation is yet another spin-off of the so-called War on Terror, but this operation is not focused on engaging military targets. Quite the contrary, it's focused on training local security forces in counterterrorism and working with local governments in an effort to stabilize the fragile Middle East region. NATO launched this operation back in 2015, and it continues to this day. So far, only 16,000 men have been deployed for this operation, but even though this operation is not focused on military combat and has not deployed so many troops, it's still very expensive. According to a government report, this operation has already spent more than $165 billion. Well, to me, it's still a mystery how governments can spend so much money with nothing to show for it. But anyway, let's continue with our list. Number 4. Operation Bagration. The next expensive military operation on our list is Operation Bagration. Operation Bagration, sometimes called the D-Day of the Eastern Front, was launched by the then Soviet Union against the German army during the Second World War. The goal of this operation was to create a big hole on the German front line and make way for the subsequent liberation of Eastern Europe. And as you can probably tell already, this was no easy feat, and so the operation had to be massive. More than 2.5 million personnel, 4,000 tanks, and close to 8,000 aircraft were mobilized for this operation. It began with bombing raids from the back to confuse the German army, then bombing raids from the front, and finally, a full-on ground assault. The operation was a success, and the Soviet Union managed to storm Nazi Germany's Eastern Front. However, they never really disclosed how much they had to spend to make this operation a reality, but we can safely assume it was more than the other operations we've talked about so far on this list, simply based on the massive number of units engaged in the operation. Number 3. Operation Enduring Freedom. Operation Enduring Freedom is the next one on our list. Also known as the War on Terror, Operation Enduring Freedom was launched in October 2001 in response to the 9/11 attacks. And it had big and bold goals, such as closing down every terrorist cell in the world, capturing all al-Qaeda leaders, and handing all terrorists to US authorities to be prosecuted. In the words of George H.W. Bush himself, then President of the United States, in the face of today's new threat, the only way to pursue peace is to pursue those who threatened it. So you can see that the US would spare no effort on this war. As usual, the US-led coalition started off the operation with massive airstrikes targeting key enemy infrastructure. And then, a massive ground campaign was deployed to hunt for terrorists. But the problem was that terrorists started fleeing to nearby countries. And so the Council of War decided to branch off the operation to those nearby countries as well, such as Syria, Iraq, and even Somalia. This led to massive cost overruns, and the operation had to deploy a lot more troops than first anticipated. More than 750,000 American troops have been deployed only to Afghanistan, and also thousands upon thousands of military jets, warships, choppers, army tanks, and air defense equipment. In total, Operation Enduring Freedom ended up costing a whopping $1 trillion. And as you can see, playing world police is not cheap, but that's the price you gotta pay if you want to end terrorism. Number 2. Operation Overlord. The next one on our list is Operation Overlord, also known as D-Day. Operation Overlord was a military operation led by US forces to release northern France from German control. And the height of the Overlord operation was the famous Battle of Normandy, which later inspired lots of films such as Saving Private Ryan and The Longest Day. Besides being one of the most expensive military operations, it was also the largest amphibious assault in history. Close to 7,000 ships were used to disembark more than 150,000 Allied troops only on the first day of the operation. And let's not forget about the 10,000 aircraft that were providing aerial support. There were massive bombing raids, machine gun fire, and endless air battles. After Omaha Beach was cleared, more than 2.5 million men and 500,000 vehicles were unloaded on northern France. Well, Operation Overlord has gone down in history as the beginning of the end of the Second World War in Europe. Unfortunately, we have no way to know exactly how much the operation has costed the US at the time. But what we do know is that the whole World War II effort has cost 40% of the American GDP in the years of 1944 and 1945. And if we consider that this operation was by far the biggest and most important military operation by the US in both of these years, I think it's safe to assume that this was the second most expensive military operation in history. Number 1. Operation Barbarossa. And the most expensive military operation on our list is Operation Barbarossa. This operation was launched during World War II when Nazi Germany decided to invade the then Soviet Union. And so, Hitler mobilized 3.8 million personnel, 4,000 tanks, 5,000 aircraft, and 600,000 vehicles for this operation. The only problem was that he had underestimated the Soviet army, as he later told one of his generals. "Had I known they had as many tanks as that, I'd have thought twice before invading," he said. The huge German mobilized troops clashed with more than 3 million soldiers, 11,000 tanks, and 9,000 aircraft on the Soviet side of the battle. This operation turned out to be a complete bloodshed, and today it holds the infamous title of the operation with the biggest casualties in military history. Now, we may never know the exact figures of this operation, but given how many troops had to be mobilized for it, it easily overshadows D-Day and the War on Terror. We can only assume that they had to burn through piles of money to make such an operation become a reality. Now, as you can see, the US has been involved in 8 out of the 10 military operations on our list, but that's not a surprise. After all, they have the biggest military budget in the world, with more than $700 billion in military spending only in 2019. And if we are being honest with one another, that's a lot of money that could be put to better use. So now I want to hear from you. What would you do if you had $700 billion in your bank account? Let me know in the comments below. And that's all for today's video. Thanks for watching, and until next time, bye.